Just some quick introductions. I am Kim Hales. I am the Director of Client Services at Sukup Strategic Solutions. I have been in fundraising for almost 20 years and have done all kinds of work with different organizations across different sectors, including higher education, human services, and the arts. And I have been a consultant here and now the Director of Client Services. So I've been with Sukup a little over a year and a half. And I will introduce my co-presenter today, Angelique Keys.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Angelique Keys, and I'm a senior consultant here at Sukup Strategic Solutions. I have been in the fundraising world for almost 18 years, and I have been with Sukup for almost 2 years now. Time flew by.
And we are really excited to cover this topic today. I think it's something that everyone from, brand new fundraisers to seasoned professionals really can talk about and talk through and give each other ideas on how this cycle works and how you keep people kind of moving through it over and over again. And so really the objectives for this webinar are going to be to understand the stages of the donor development cycle, but also understand how each of those stages really flow from one to another and kind of the timing, which is different for every donor of how long you're in each cycle, how you can implement some of the best practices in cultivation and solicitation strategies, and really how you can use that stewardship process to really create retention practices and to increase giving. So I am going to have and throw it over to Angelique to just go over the cycle and how it functions.
Yes, so for most people who are in the fundraising world, you know that most of your donors or your prospects tend to be somewhere in this chart and operating at all different levels and all different speeds as they go through the cycle. From someone who you're trying to identify, if they're either a prospect that is going to become a donor, maybe they're a volunteer, or maybe a board member that hasn't quite given yet, really trying to go through that identifying and qualification phase to figure out where they align with the philanthropic goals of your organization. And then moving them from identification to cultivation with really building that personalized relationship with them and kind of gauging where they are, what their interest is, what really drives them, and what they're passionate about, and where they, tend to have their philanthropic interests. From there, going into the solicitation phase, the actual receiving of the gift, and then how do you express your gratitude and steward them post-gift? And we'll talk about more of these cycles, or more of each cycle in depth. And as you know, this kind of cycle, it tends to go around and around. Usually once someone comes in, they go through cultivation, solicitation, stewardship, and then they go back into cultivation. And you kind of just keep going around in the cycle with them through their relationship with your organization.
All right. So identification, and this is something that, there are several different terms from. It's prospecting, identification. This is really the first phase in the cycle and how you really identify who those donors or potential donors could be. And it's important in this phase to really talk about identification of the right donors and what kind of tools and technologies you're going to use for that donor identification. And this is the place where especially newer nonprofits or people newer to fundraising can sometimes, struggle in how you identify your next annual donor or your next major donor, or how you get people engaged in the organization that either haven't been or have been engaged but aren't donating yet. And so, there are some, tools and systems that you can use, but it's really about educating your constituent base on who you are, and then identifying who has that ability to give, who has a link to the organization, and how you move them into that cultivation phase. And I think, from my perspective, and Angelique, I know you have a lot of experience in this, there are tools you can use, and wealth screening tools are really a great tool, but they're just that. So they're going to tell you, who has a capacity to give at a certain level, but you've really got to understand their link to the organization. And in some cases, you need to really educate them about who you are and what you're doing and what those outcomes are before you can move them on into that next phase. So Angelique, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your process and what your experience has been in using those tools to really identify who's going to rise to the top in that prospective donor.
Yeah, so for each organization, this looks very different. I come from a background in higher education, so identifying our donors came from our alumni pool. I've also worked in nonprofits where we had strong volunteer programs, and not many of those volunteers were donors. So these were individuals who were actively engaged and already had a connection to the organization. So it's very easy to start to your identification / prospecting phase there. If you're an organization that does not have that kind of already built-in constituent base, that's where tools like some of the wealth screening tools that also offer prospecting, but even I will say some of the old school ways, Kim, I know you and I have talked about this before. I spent a lot of my time as a frontline fundraiser going through the annual reports of other organizations, seeing who's donating to organizations that are doing the same kind of work that you do, not only what foundations, but what individuals, and really figuring out like what events around town are those individuals at, what other ways that you can connect with those people who are already giving. They've shown that they're philanthropic, they're giving to organizations with similar causes. And how do you go from not only identifying who in your community or in your realm does that, but also how do you put yourself in kind of the same space that they are? So yes, there's a lot of advanced tool software, but there's also those good old school ways of finding information about what makes some of the people tick.
Right. And to that end, we're going to launch a poll here in just a second, because I'd love to know from the perspective of everyone in here, how you're tracking, because that's going to be, one of the most important things, especially in moving people along the cycle, but understanding where you're getting and keeping your information. So for some of you, I'm sure a lot of you are using a CRM, but I'm guessing there are some of you who are using spreadsheets, some of you who are not tracking at all. Or maybe you're tracking donors in your CRM, but you're not tracking volunteer engagement or board engagement. So I would love to know, really where everyone is in terms of how they're keeping that data up to date, how you're using it. And so this poll is going to give us a little bit of that. Looks like I can see, some of you are using a combination, about 70% have a CRM, so that's great. I see 0 people using spreadsheets, which is also sort of good to hear, but about 10% not tracking. So I think that's one of the things that's really important, is your data is what's going to help you move all of these things forward and be able to really track the cycle and how that works.
And just for anyone, I saw a question pop up in the chat. And so by CRM, we mean any type of database that's outside of an Excel spreadsheet. Some people use Razor's Edge, Donor Perfect, Give Butter, Reher, Little Green Light, and there's other ones that people use for volunteers and individuals that are not donors. So we're talking about anybody that is affiliated with your organization, so a constituent, and how you're tracking them. So basically a database.
Yeah, and for those of you, again, who are new to fundraising or a new nonprofit, you may not have that in place yet, and right now you're tracking on spreadsheets. The 12% here that are not tracking, I would love to talk to you about how that can help you move that forward. So, when you get the information post webinar, reach out and we can give you some suggestions on tools for that. Even if it's just starting with a spreadsheet, you've got to be tracking who you're talking to, who's connected to them, because that's what's going to move you from this identification into cultivation. And again, talking to people about who else they know, whether that's your board or your volunteers. I think one of the strongest questions anyone can ask in the prospecting phase, and when you're talking to donors or any of your constituents, anyone who's engaged with your organization, is, do you know anyone else who you think would believe in this mission and who we should reach out to give them the information about what we're doing and to share that with them? Not asking them to ask for a gift. You're not asking them to even be the one to do that. You're really just asking if there's anyone that they know that would believe in your mission. Before we move on to the cultivation phase, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. I'm just taking a quick look. Or Angelique, anything else you want to share in this identification phase?
And I was gonna, as we were talking, I was thinking about the other ways that I've done some identification and some kind of like prospecting work. I will say social media, especially like I've found like LinkedIn or even social media pages of groups that are in your area. Like say if you're an animal shelter and there's a lot of like animal lover groups, there's those, the 5Ks, the 10Ks, dog walking groups, things of that nature. Sometimes connecting with or seeing who their constituents are, friending them on LinkedIn or adding them on LinkedIn or connecting with them on LinkedIn, things like that. That's also a great way for you to connect with someone. And as you're sharing, especially like I used to have a professional Facebook page and a personal one. And on my professional one, I would connect with those individuals. So as I'm posting things about our organization, they're naturally seeing it come across their timeline as well, which is also a great way to try to identify with who's liking and who's engaging with you and who is interested in the type of work that your organization is carrying out.
All right. Donor cultivation. And I know Angelique want to take this one on.
Yes. So cultivation. So once you've identified your prospects, and so there's some in the fundraising world, there's typically either 4 or 5 steps, depending on how your organization does fundraising. For me personally, with the organizations I've been with, part of the identification stage is not only identifying who's interested in your mission and your cause, but also qualifying them. And sometimes you'll find that there are individuals who they're really, really passionate about the work you do, but they're just not going to become a donor. They're not interested. They may already have a strong allegiance somewhere else, and they're just like, I'm not interested in giving. Or they may not have the capacity to give. And so you go through this. A part of identification is really also qualifying and disqualifying who you're going to move into cultivation. And so cultivation is really, I've identified this person as someone who has interest in, what the work we're doing, who is likely to make a gift. And so that cultivation phase is like that relationship. I call it the friend raising phase, where we are really working on a personal relationship with this individual, depending on what type of gift you're thinking of, their capacity, their interest. This could be something as simple as they're on your newsletter list, you're sending personal check-ins. If there's someone who is like a major gift prospect, this could be lunches. This could be involving your leadership. It's really designing building that relationship, getting to know them, drawing them in deeper into your organization, helping them understand the impact of philanthropy, and how the philanthropic gifts the donations and philanthropic gifts that come into your organization, and really showing them like every dollar that is given to us or your gift counts. Here's what we do with it. And during this phase, getting to know them, but also watching for those little cues about where will they fall when it comes to what type of gift to ask. This is a very important part. And it looks different for every single donor. Kim, do you want to share what your experience and what you found best practices in cultivation are?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it comes from, again, taking the lead from the donor. When you do your prospecting and qualification, to Angelique's point, you have to understand where they are in their connection to the organization. So for some donors, this process could be very short. You've identified them as the potential to grow from an annual donor to a major gift prospect, and they are really engaged in the organization. they're a volunteer, they're a board member and have, been giving at that annual fund level, and they're really ready. And so having a few conversations with them, talking to them about what they want their impact with the organization to be, and that process can be fairly quick. There are some donors who you've identified as someone, again, in that qualification process, that maybe hasn't given to the organization at all, but does have an interest in the type of work that you do. They've been giving to other organizations that do, work in that same sector, and you've just begin that conversation with them, but they have a really large capacity. And so you're working with them on that major gift prospect, or maybe you're in a capital campaign and they're in that major gift solicitation or cultivation process. That could take a long time. And so understanding where they are is really important, and really taking the feedback from them, personalizing their communications, but also giving them opportunities to engage. The best thing an organization can do in this cultivation phase is show them your work in real time, in real life. Take a tour, meet with clients, whatever that looks like for you. Again, if it's a animal shelter, it's doing something with the animals. If it's working in children's literacy, maybe it's the ability to come in and do a storytelling session. Finding ways to engage people in your organization so they can see the work that you do in process can really be the most impactful thing in this cultivation process. But again, taking the cues from those donors and understanding that the timeline is you don't want to leave anything on the table. You don't want to wait too long to do something, but you really do have to understand where they are and how engaged they are before determining when you can make that solicitation, which, we'll get to next. But part of this is really monitoring that engagement. Back to how you're tracking everything. If you can see that a prospect has come to your last 3 events, or is volunteering on a regular basis, and how often they're engaging with you, you can see kind of where they are on that continuum and understand. So that, back to that tracking piece, that's really important. Monitoring that and then adjusting approaches. So let's say you send out several different emails and you look at what the open rate or return rate or engagement rate is in that, and it's not, you can see one piece of that isn't working. Then you go back, adjust that strategy, monitor it, look at what's working, what isn't working, and kind of change some of those approaches as you do that.
One of the things I was going to share too, Kim, is you really talked about it. This is probably the most strategic aspect of fundraising. And you do this at different levels. So when you have your donor base or your prospect base, some of them may already be donors that you're moving back through the cycle. Some of them are just coming in to your organization as constituents, and you're trying to figure out what their donation relationship, or the donor relationship with you looks like. Couldn't get that out. And so sometimes you're doing this with a mass group of people, going through the automation phase of getting them a newsletter or getting them an annual report, or sending out thank you, anniversary of gift emails or things like that to get them to give again. And you're trying to figure out how to make it feel personal on a mass scale. Sometimes you're also simultaneously doing this one-on-one with donors. So you have this group that's kind of going through, maybe it's your annual fund, maybe your giving societies, things like that. But you're also working individual relationships with some other donors that you're trying to build deeper, more meaningful relationships with. It is very important to, one, have a strategy. I always recommend that fundraisers take a step back and look at, okay, if I'm an annual fund donor, what does communication with me look like from start to finish? I know at a lot of organizations, you have a development team focused on fundraising that is also communicating alongside maybe a marketing team. And so you really have to step back and think holistically, what does that look like? But the last thing you want to do is have a prospect or a donor that when they step back at the end of the year has received 30 emails from you because they're getting one from you, and then they got one from this person, then the organization sends out a newsletter, then they had a fundraiser, and then they had this. So I always say to step back and think from a donor perspective, if you were the donor and you looked at everything that, every way the organization connected with you or every touch point, what does that look like? And I tell you, there's been a few times it has humbled me when I stepped to the other side and really looked at everything holistically. And I was like, oh crap, we've emailed this person like 20 times this year. That is insane. And so trying to figure out what that looks like for your donor, but also where as a fundraiser, you can personalize that communication by saying, if you have a newsletter or say something you guys are in the press and you send it to them personally. So I would often do that and would say, hey, Kim, I'm not sure if you've seen our newsletter. I thought about you when I saw this article, or hey, we were just on KTVU. They did a special segment on such and such, such and such. I know you said you were interested in this. So I just figured I'd share with you. Hope all is well. And so there's a lot of ways to, I know typically you don't have a big shop when it comes to fundraising. So looking for those ways to adjust your strategies that don't require a lot more manpower, but that are also very considerate of the donor, because the last thing you want to do is end up on their unsubscribe or don't answer list.
Right. And we are, a little bit later going to get into some ways that, AI can help make some of these processes more efficient. But the one thing I'll say is thinking about what your communication with them is when you're not making an ask. So it's really important to have those pieces in there where it isn't about making any kind of ask, where it really is informative. Back to, not to keep harping on tracking and that, but do you know when their birthdays are? Do you know when big things are happening in their lives? Now, again, can you do that if you're a huge organization and you have hundreds of donors? Can you do that for everyone? No. But are you doing that for your, top tier donors? Do you know when, a big anniversary is coming up? Are you sending some of those communications? One small thing like that where they know that you care about them as a person can be really, really impactful. I'd actually love if anyone wants to put in the chat if they're tracking any of that kind of work, whether you're sending birthday cards or anniversary cards, or you are, you have some Google alerts set up for your top tier donors, and when they've gotten an award and you're sending congratulations to them, or any of those things that anybody is doing.
I'm seeing some yeses. I'd also
Yeah.
know, Kim, and even the chat, I'd love to hear some of the most creative ways that you guys are doing cultivation. Kim, I know you've been in fundraising a very long time. If anyone else has something that they want to share about some creative ways that they've seen cultivation done, I love anytime someone's thinking outside the box and they do something. It's like, wow, we all send a lot of emails, birthday cards, things like that. But what are some creative ways you've seen cultivation done, Kim?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that personalization and really being there on that personal level. Several of the things you said, oh, I saw this, it really made me think of you. Those are the best strategies. Well, I don't know that they're completely out of the box, but to your point, you send a birthday card, which is great. That's a step up from not doing that. But understanding who your donors are on a personal level, what interests them. If you have that CRM, can you put, what are they most interested in? Do their, kids play some huge sport? Again, you can't do this for everyone, but if you're looking at the people on your prospect list or in your cultivation list that are your top tier and really personalizing those, that's going to be your best strategy in that cultivation base. Do you know their favorite restaurant, and are you inviting them out to lunch there? All of the things, the more you know about your donor, the better that cultivation process can be.
And I am seeing some people chime in with the birthday cards, anniversary cards. I love the sympathy cards. That is something that I think is an easy way to show your donor you also care about them. Of course, having it signed by office staff, by the team, by the programs or departments they're interested in. And even for shops that do have a small bandwidth, Linda, I know you mentioned that. One of the easiest ways that I always do is I always do gift anniversaries. It's a great way to recapture lapsed donors. So, and what I mean by that is I would each month pull a report of everybody who had not given. So if we're going into September, I would pull a report for everybody who gave last September that hasn't given this entire year. And I would send them all one email, personalized, sometimes through constant contact, that would say, thank you for your gift last September. In the last year, your gift helped us, da, 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 da. We hope you renew your support again today. Or sometimes I wouldn't even make an ask, but just to let them know that we acknowledge the fact that this is your gift anniversary. Sometimes we would do cards in the mail, things like that. We do digital cards. But just acknowledging that, we appreciate the gift you made a year ago today, and we celebrate, your generosity. And I found that was a great way to recapture donors who maybe had made a gift, or those like one-time donors that kind of made a gift and never gave again. So that's an easy way, especially if you have a small shop, to kind of reach a handful or more constituents at once.
All right. And there's a couple, strategies that I think, as you talk about stewardship, going right back into cultivation, that I think we'll get to in stewardship. But again, to Angelique's point in that gift anniversary, and she said something really important in there. This is what your gift did last year. Not would you make another gift, which you should add into there, but really giving the donor that information. And so back to understanding who your donors are and what's going to motivate them, knowing what their gift did, even if it was $100, how that made an impact to your organization is really, really important to be sharing that, especially when you're going to ask them to repeat that gift. So we're going to move into solicitation now, which I think one of the biggest questions I think we get, and I think people ask, is how do you know when it's the right time to make that ask? So Angelique, what's your answer to that when someone on your team or another fundraiser asks you, how do you know when it's the right time to move from cultivation into that solicitation?
And so Kim, you and I had a conversation about this yesterday, actually. And if you've done the cultivation phase right, it should almost feel like, and I hate to say dating, but like friendship that goes into dating. Like you kind of both should feel it naturally gravitating towards that next step of like, will you be my girlfriend kind of thing. I feel like if cultivation is done right, you guys are both on the same page. You can kind of know that we've advanced to this point where it's now time to ask for a gift, or it would be appropriate to ask, like, what do you think about, your continued, and sometimes I will say this, I don't come out all the time and just say like, okay, so hey, are you ready to give that $10,000 to this program? Sometimes I'll ask genuinely, like, what do you see your relationship and your contributions to XYZ organization looking like in the future? Like, where would you like to have the biggest impact at, XYZ organization, and really have honest conversation about that. There are times I've prepared full proposals that are like written proposals, requests for a gift, especially when dealing with higher level donors who are making major gifts, but it should really be something that feels organic to both you and the donor. Occasionally you'll find donors that they can stay in the cultivation period forever. They'll let you take them out to lunch over and over and over and over. And sometimes you just like, okay, are we doing this or we're not? And I've had to just say, like, hey, so we have XYZ coming up. That is a great tactic to use if you have something coming up. If it's the end of the year, if there's things like that, and you're like, I need to get this person, like, I need to just ask because we've been doing this dance forever. And you can say, I know a lot of people are thinking about, what their year-end giving looks like, especially when it comes to their tax, deductions and things like that. Have you considered, or are you considering making a gift to XYZ organization this year? We'd love to capture you at blah, 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 blah. Or we'd love to make sure that we include you in this year's annual report, things like that. If you're really feeling like I'm just not able to move the needle with them to get them to where I'm like, okay, it's time. That's a great way to do it. I will say timing is huge, but Kim, as you and I discussed, appropriateness is huge. That is a big part of the cultivation period, is understanding, are you asking this person for $100? Are you asking them for 10,000? Are you asking them for a pledge? Like, can they do 10,000, but not right all at once? They really would prefer to do 2,500 over, a couple years. So I think timeliness is important, but also appropriateness. And that is where I find is the sweet spot of really understanding what their giving capacity is and how much, what level they're comfortable giving in, and then how much you should push them to kind of nudge them a little bit, so that you don't leave money on the table, but that you're also very respectful of where you guys are at in your relationship and where they're at with your organization.
Yeah, we did have this conversation yesterday, and I share this because I've been doing this for a very long time, and people always say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how you do that. Asking people for money is, sounds terrible." And I will say, and I don't know if Angelique, this has been your experience. I have, in my almost 20-year career, have been hung up on once in my entire career. And that was because someone was upset that the university did something related to athletics, had nothing to do with, anything related to, and I wasn't even making an ask. So if you've done all of the things right along the way, if you've built that relationship, even if the answer is no, it's likely a no right now, and you're not, you're in a place where you're leaving the door open for what's next, or was that not the appropriate amount? Is there something else you can do? So having that mindset, especially for, some of the people in the chat have said they're brand new, or their organization is brand new and they haven't really done this before. It's preparing that mindset that you're asking, I shouldn't even said asking, what your role as a fundraiser is to take the impact a donor wants to make and pair them with an organization that does that work. That's what you're doing. You're really giving them the opportunity to make an impact. So if you're building that right, and you're building that relationship, and you're talking to them in that cultivation stage about what that looks like, what impact they want to make, what, if you're talking about planned giving, what legacy they want to leave for the world and your organization, you're in a place where you should understand about where that ask is. You may not be right on, but you shouldn't be asking for $100 when they could do 100,000, and vice versa, right? You should have, in that cultivation stage, an understanding of the likelihood of where that gift should fall, and you should be talking about that. But bridging that gap from where you are in that conversation to actually making the solicitation is a really important piece, and something to, again, you don't want to wait too long, and you want to make that ask. Sometimes a lot of fundraisers sort of wait till the donor is giving them the amount that they want, or is making the gift. And if you don't actually make the ask, a lot of times you're leaving some money on the table. Or if you're not giving them, to Angelique's point, the opportunity to make a pledge over time, where maybe they could give $100,000, but it's going to be over 4 years. Then you have the opportunity, when those 4 years are up, to renew that gift again, and to talk to them about what that next step is for impact for the organization. So really thinking about how and when you make that ask is really important.
And
And
Kim, I
knowing
don't want
how to do it,
oh,
whether that's, oh, sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I'm
No,
gonna say, whether that's, dependent on the level of the ask and the donor. For some donors, $1,000 gift is a major gift to them, and they want to be asked in person, and they want to have that. And that $1,000 gift right now might be $10,000 in 5 years if you are doing that solicitation and that stewardship correctly. So understanding what that means to a donor. For some people, your major gift level donors, $100,000, it's a large gift, but it may be something they do for multiple organizations. And yes, you should be doing that in person, and you should be building that up, but they're used to giving at that level. And sometimes when you're moving people from $100 annual gift to $1,000, that solicitation piece and how you're asking them is really important. And it's going to set the stage for that growth in their giving.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I was going to share, Kim, too, is really going back to how important that cultivation phase is before you get here. Because what I find a lot of times working with organizations, especially as a consultant, is you'll see someone and they're like, so and so, like they have so much money, they live in this neighborhood, they make this much. Just because a person has money does not mean they're going to give it to you. I learned that very early on in my fundraising career. And so capacity is important, but you also want to look for those individuals who have given $25 every year for 10 years and has not missed, their monthly payment for 10 years. I've found so many gems in my consecutive fiscal year donors when I was at organizations, individuals who got looked over because all they were giving was $100, and everybody focuses on those who were giving 1,000 and 5,000. And here we had this one amazing woman who ended up making a significant gift once someone talked to her, but she got overlooked because she was only giving $25 a month, but she had been doing it for like 10 years. So it is very important that just shows how much the identification and cultivation phase plays into this. But I also know that I saw some individuals in the chat say they're agreeing with fundraising. 17 years later, I can say the ask is the easy part. It's so easy. Like once you're here, it's a piece of cake. I will tell you, coming into fundraising, I hated this part. I will go out to lunch with you. I will get you coffee. I will send you birthday card. This part used to make me shake in my boots. And now it's easy. And so very early on, and I'm going to share this with everyone, someone told me this quote and I pulled it up, quote, phase, strategy. And it made it really easy for me to settle into being a fundraiser and getting to the point where I am now, where I'm like, I'll ask anybody for anything. And it says, as a fundraiser, my job is to connect individuals with opportunities to make an impact to causes that align with their passion in ways that are meaningful to them. So I'm not just asking for money, but similar to what Kim said, I am serving as a connector. I am serving as a connector between this person who is passionate about something and helping them identify how do they use that passion and use their philanthropic interest to make an impact in a way that is meaningful to them. Sometimes that's a $25,000 gift. Sometimes that's them leaving their estate to you. Sometimes that's them donating a house that can be turned into a women's shelter. It looks very different for every single donor. And once you realize that as a fundraiser, that you are a fundraiser, but you really are a connector, I think that takes some of the kind of fear that comes with that solicitation and the ask out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfect. That's what something very similar. That person must have seen that quote also, because it's something that I was also told really early on, and a little bit of the point I was making here, especially when people say, oh, that seems so scary, or it's not anything I could do. And we talk to boards about this a lot. Angelique, I know your work as a consultant and just in organizations where you're talking to board members, and board members will say, I can't do that. That's not my area that I'm willing to do. And it's because they don't understand what that means. They're not just asking their friends for money. And that's where that training for your boards and that understanding is really going to come into play. So for many of you who are the lead fundraiser in your organization and working with your boards on this, because the best person for a major gift solicitation really is a peer. And you should be, as the professional fundraiser, helping facilitate that, build some of those relationships. But if you can get your board members on board with making some of those asks with you and in collaboration, it just goes so much farther. But part of that is training in what your outlook is on that, and how you can shift your mindset and what it means to make a solicitation.
Yeah, what are some of the ways that you've seen the ask be done? Like, how do you just give them a call, like, hey, you ready to write that check? Or like, what are some of your what are some of the ways that you find, or like, this is how I go about the ask?
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
I mean, a little bit. I know it sounds so I don't know, I don't want to dumb it down in any way, but to your point, like, this part should be the easiest. It's the most straightforward. If you've cultivated the relationship right and it's the right time, again, I think in person is always the best. Now, some donors have zero desire to do that. They are happy to write a check. They don't want to take a tour. They don't want to go out to lunch. They don't want those things. but I don't think that's the majority of them. And so really having that relationship and saying, especially when you have a time frame around it because of a campaign or an event or the end of the year, but it's about just asking. um you know, we've talked about what the impact you want to make is, and this is how a $10,000 gift would do that. Is that something you're prepared to do right now? That's it. I mean, it's just about asking. That this phase, which again sounds the scariest, is the quickest, and in the right, if you've done the work the right way, the easiest.
Yeah, and I will say too, if you find that you're having trouble with how to make the ask, sometimes it's okay for this to be a conversation. It doesn't have to just be a flat out, so hey, can we count on you for that $10,000, or that $500 or whatever it is. But sometimes it's, after you've shared all the information, just saying, hi, Kim, I wanted to check in with you. I know we've talked a lot about our upcoming golf tournament, or we've talked a lot about our upcoming capital campaign. I wanted to see if you had any additional questions, or if you've thought about where you would like to participate in the different, giving opportunities related to XYZ or blah, 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 blah. And then also saying, if you don't see a way to give that we've already listed, but you have something else in mind, please let me know. Like, I'm happy to discuss that. Because sometimes they'll look at the paper and they're like, they do want to give $10,000, but you didn't list a pledge option. And so they don't even know that's an option, kind of thing. So it's okay to have conversations around what they're thinking and to ask them, and sometimes they'll say not at this time. And sometimes they'll say, like, not really want to doing the golf tournament, but I will give you $500 towards that. And so then you look for other ways that well, how would you like to make an impact? Or is there another event we have that you really care about more, that you'd rather have a table at, or things like that. And so this can be a conversation too. If you're not really clear, don't wait for like the skies to part and the sun to shine directly in your face and it's that aha, do this moment. Because sometimes it doesn't look like that. Sometimes you have to just ask them, like, well, where do you see yourself fitting, or what's comfortable for you right now? And that's okay too.
These are some great suggestions. I do want to move on to stewardship because we do have some things like that I would love to get to post that and to give some time for questions and answers at the end. So moving into stewardship, and I think this is one of the things that maybe gets the most overlooked, but really cultivation and stewardship in my mind are the two most important phases in this process. Because really, without the proper stewardship, that gift can go away very quickly. So
first and last.
yes. So having, some automation in this, again, making sure that within, 24 hours, you are sending out that thank you letter. Depending on your organization and where, annual gifts and major gifts fall, making sure you have a structure for if a gift is over a certain amount, it's getting a really personalized thank you, whether that's from the CEO or the fundraiser or the board, and making sure that all goes out very quickly. Making sure you're taking those gifts in, processing them right away. The last thing you want to do is hold on to a $10,000 check for 2 weeks and the donor has to call you and say, why hasn't my check been cashed? So, the timeliness of doing all of that is really important. And one of the things that I love to talk about, as you can see on data, I think it's really important to track all of these things, but is about improving and giving donors the opportunities to give feedback. I think that can help refine your process and really move things forward. So after they've made that gift, or maybe 6 months later, asking them to go out for coffee and talking to them about the process, and have they gotten enough information about the impact of that gift, and what did the process look like and feel like for them? Was there anything in there that we could have done differently or better to improve that? People love to give advice. And again, you're just opening up that conversation for that donor, but also to give you kind of real-time feedback on how you can improve your process. And then repeat giving. It's so much easier and less costly to maintain a donor and to get that gift, that annual gift every year, and to move them along the continuum to a major gift than it is to find a new donor. And so really understanding how you can use that data, identify their patterns, understand, to Angelique's point earlier, they've been giving $25 every month for 5 years. It's time to talk to them about an increased gift. And maybe they're only getting your, email thank you when they make that recurring gift, because you're only seeing it as that $25. But like mining that data to understand where they are and being able to thank them appropriately for what they've been doing, and understanding where that meaningfulness of the gift is for them.
And I think too, Kim, the reporting and transparency cannot be overlooked. Usually when you do a financial transaction, you get something back. I go into Target, I give them, I'm usually getting an item going home with me that I've given the money for. And so you have to remember that the same thing applies with fundraising and with donations. What you give them in return is showing them how their dollar has made an impact. Even if it's $10, it's your gift helped us to blah, 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 blah. If they gave and their gift covered it all, then it's like your gift did this. But it's okay if their gift just helped you guys do that or helped you fulfill your mission. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of reporting and impact reporting. And even if it's just a quick update or a success story or a client story or whatever it is important to circle back. You never want them to feel like they gave you the money and you just disappeared. And stewardship is usually where a lot of organizations kind of fizzle out because they've gotten the gift and they're busy and they move on. But this is a very, very important part of this process, because most donors should be going from stewardship right back into cultivation for their next gift.
Exactly. And it is sort of the easiest thing to let go of when you're busy, but you never want the next thing a donor gets is another ask. Yes. Right? You've got to be like going back, even if it's a $100 annual gift. You don't want them to only get once a year a request for $100. We're going to go through the next slide fairly quickly so we can get to some of the strategies for AI. I'm going to let Angelique go with, we'll do one of these examples. And so just to talk through like one donor through the full cycle. So I'll let you talk about Sherry.
Yeah, so Sherry was a donor that I inherited. She had already made a significant gift to the university. She had an established scholarship. And she just kind of, everybody was checking in with her. And as a frontline fundraiser, she fell into my portfolio. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do with her? She's already given her gift. Turns out that Sherry actually was a widow and she had no children. So she was still in my portfolio because where was she going to leave her estate? They also felt that she could make a larger contribution to endow her scholarship, because at this point she was just giving us $2,500 a year. And I chose this example because this is an example of someone who already made a significant gift, was giving every year, would continue to give every year, but then it was recognized that she had additional capacity. So I treated coming in Sherry like she was a brand new donor. I called her, I introduced myself at our first meeting. I asked her what inspired her to give, what other organizations does she support? You know, some of them were completely different than what she was supporting us with. And I talked to her about that, about why, how did you become interested in that? What drew you to that organization? Da, 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 da. And so we went back to a cultivation phase, which for her was like a cultivation and stewardship at the same time. What we ended up doing was, for this program she supported, doing an annual lunch each year with 2 or 3 students from the program that she supported. And she loved this. As someone who lived alone, lives out in a very rural area, she looked forward to this simple lunch. We went to the same restaurant every year for the 5 years I was there. We had lunch. The students loved it. She loved it. And when it came time for us to be in a capital campaign, it took me 3 years. And I asked her, I said, have you thought about endowing your scholarship? And I had already prepared all the numbers and everything in different levels, because I wasn't sure where she was level wise. I wasn't sure if it was going to be 25, 75, 100, 150. And she actually ended up doing $250,000 endowed scholarship. But I gave her options because, again, I wasn't sure. But this was a great example for me as a fundraising professional of someone who could have easily just been in our stewardship bucket, getting thank you letters, getting a call here and there. But we were actually able to cultivate that relationship with her again, and steward her at the same time and secure a 6-figure gift that actually is an endowment that's going to continue to give each year. And even in stewarding her, she was a cat lover. I'm allergic to cats, but we worked it out. And one of the gifts that we gave her, it cost us $25, was we got her a personalized, I was at a university, so a personalized Sacramento State cat dish. And when I tell you she talks about that cat dish, I still check in with her from time to time, and she still talks about how much she loves that cat dish. So it's just a great example of thoughtfulness and how little things go a long way, but also how if the relationship is handled right, your donors should be moving up through the cycle and up through your pyramid in their giving level, their frequency of giving, and the amount they're giving.
Thanks for that. Real quick here, you know, we talked a little bit about this in the beginning, and I know people had some questions on what a CRM was. There are so many tools and resources that you can use in this work. Some of them are very costly and some of them are not. And so looking at the right tools for you at the right time and building up a plan with some of the software that you can grow with. So some of those platforms are very modular in nature, and you can start with something and grow into using additional tools along the way. But really tracking your data is one of the most important things you're gonna do, and to be able to understand the patterns in your donors and when you move them through the cycle again. So just some of the tools, there's, you know, multiple different software in each of those. You know, in social media management, there's a bunch of different companies that do that. In event management, there's a bunch of different companies, but those are all things that you can usually add to whatever kind of CRM that you're using. Lots of them have multiple integrations and that you can use. Again, if there are questions about any of that, feel free to reach out to us. We'll give you our information in a minute. But, you know, we've got just about 5 minutes left. And I know that this is something that's really important for everyone right now, because this is, you know, a very hot topic. Everyone's using it. There are, just like any other tools, it's incredibly helpful and it can make you more efficient, but understanding how to use it, what its limitations are, and some of the best practices are really important. And you know, we've talked a lot about this. One of the most important things you can do in an organization is have an AI usage policy. So you, your staff, your team, your donors understand how you're utilizing it. But these are some of the ways that you can use AI in your donor development cycle.
All right. Yeah. So this has become my jam. I am not going to lie to you guys. I was anti-AI for a full couple months. And now that I have discovered how much it can help me in my fundraising world, I am in love. Sometimes it can be as simple as, I just don't know where to start this letter for this donor. Here's what I know about them. Help me craft a thank you letter, or help me craft one with an ask, and just to get me started. Other times I'm using it to analyze large sets of data, which is extremely helpful for me. Obviously, removing personal information of donors. Don't upload that to that little system, guys. We want to make sure that we protect our donors' privacy. But sometimes I'm looking for trends. Sometimes I'm looking for, like, you know, how long is, you know, has my consecutive, like, where are most of my donors giving the most consecutively? Is it 5 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 2 years? Like, what's that sweet spot? Sometimes it's for personalization engagement or personalized engagement, really looking at like what programs or where are we finding they give the most? What time of year are they giving the most often? So I know that I'm going to then back up my communications and double down on impact reporting ahead of when we're seeing these trends of where most of our donors tend to make their gifts. Sometimes it's the end of the year. Sometimes it's not. You'll find in other places, if you're an organization that serves children, sometimes it's right before the school year starts in September. So that lets you know if you're really wanting to have them thinking about the impact of their gift, you're going to want to drop some communications before you start that upswing. And I think it's also very helpful to see, even for social media, how much your donors are engaging, which, you know, of your email communications, which one really got donors opening it, looking at it, reading, staying in it the longest, clicking. And AI is a great way, especially if you don't have a lot of staff, to do that and do it quickly. Or even if you do have a lot of staff, it's a great way to free them up to do other things, when you can just rely on this wonderful tool to help offset some of that manual labor that comes along with really running a development shop and engaging in fundraising.
Thank you. So I do want to have anyone put some questions in the chat if they have them. We'll do our best to answer them in the next 3 minutes while we are wrapping up. We're going to talk about a few other things real quickly as we hope to get some of those questions in there. You know, we at Souped Up Strategic Solutions are a full service consulting firm. We can manage a lot of your solutions that you will need and help you really maximize your impact in what you're doing in your organization. So these are some of the services that we provide. And we have 2 of these opportunities right now. So you can scan those QR codes. Our Ask an Expert is really for anything you have a question about. If you didn't get to it in the chat or we didn't answer it and you want to reach out individually with something that you're looking for advice on, we are happy to answer those questions. That will take you directly to our Ask an Expert page, and you'll be able to reach out to us with those specific questions in those specific areas and get some answers from our team of experts. In the talking about AI and how to use it, we are starting our 2nd cohort of our AI fundamentals course, which is taught by our one of our senior consultants, Josh Hirsch, who also teaches digital fundraising at the Lilly School and is really the expert in generative AI for nonprofits and really speaks across the country about this topic and is teaching this class. Right now, it's the 2nd cohort, so we are offering a 25% discount on that course. You can use this QR code and that code to do that as well. And I see a question: are there secrets to reaching large donors outside of your circle of current donors? I don't think there's any secrets, really. It is about understanding who you're connected to and who they're connected to. You know, so for an organization, back to kind of some of the discussion earlier, in that if you can ask the people that you're closest to if they know other individuals who would be interested in your mission. Again, there are prospecting tools like iWave or Wealth Engine that you can see people who are giving to like organizations or have an interest in the kind of work that you do, but it's still it's very difficult to just blindly reach out to someone. So even if you can identify those people, seeing some of those softwares will also show you who they're connected to, what other boards they serve on. So you can see if you have anyone in your circle who knows them and is able to make that introduction, because that's going to be really important in how you reach people, especially people with you know, high capacity that are on the radar of lots of other organizations. So having some kind of personal connection to them is pretty important.
I will say, Kim, there have been times where I haven't had a personal connection. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of times I'll connect with them on LinkedIn. A lot of times I'll go to their LinkedIn. I'll do research on them. Here in Sacramento, and I'm sure in other areas, we have Metro Chamber of Commerce. So I can think of one prospect who was a high net worth prospect, and I know he was very active in the Metro Chamber of Commerce here. And so I went to a few of the Metro lunches. And I ended up just introducing myself and just saying, you know, hi, I just wanted to stop and introduce myself. I'm Angelique Keys. I'm with such and such, such and such. I just wanted to thank you for speaking today, or da da da. And then friended him on LinkedIn, and then followed up and was like, it was so nice to see you at Metro Chamber. I hope that we're able to keep in touch. And by that way, like keeping it very natural and organic, sometimes I shared stuff with him on our organization because I knew he was interested, or I invited him to stuff at the university. And even at another organization I was with, to say, you know, I know you're busy, but we're having this, hope to see you. And one day he actually did come to one of our speaking sessions, probably because the mayor was there, but he did come. And it gave me an opportunity to connect with him. So there are ways to put yourself also in the room with some of those individuals, but it's never appropriate to just walk up and immediately be like, hi, I'm from such and such, and I'm a fundraiser. I'd love to talk to you about a gift. You know, you still want all of your relationships to feel very organic when possible.
Well, I know on behalf of both of us, we thank you for your time today and for your engagement. We hope that this gave you some more insight into the donor development cycle. And again, feel free to reach out. We're happy to answer questions on anything and follow up to this or other questions that you might have. Again, you'll get the slides and I believe the video post webinar today. And we hope you'll reach out and ask any other questions we have. And thanks for your time.